Now, today we will add to the communion experience with the addition of taking a few moments to prepare our hearts and minds for sacred instruction. Now, this portion requires the use of one gold raw candle and or one white nectar candle and quality frankincense, which is called senetter in the Kemetic tradition, which translates as divine fragrance. If you don't have these things, it's also fine. You can still gain value from this process nevertheless. So let us begin. Now, as you light your candles and your incense, take a few moments and allow the spirit of quietude to alight upon you. And then sooner before later, you'll notice that something as unassuming as lighting a candle and burning incense can make you instantly and automatically relax. Relaxation leads to your peace. Your peace opens the way to your power. And as you sit with an aura of calmness and contemplate the energy of the day, with every inhalation and exhalation, all static energy, stagnant energy, and negative energy gets pushed outwards and away until only you remain, perfectly centered and calm, like the black dot in the center of the circle, or the symbol of Ra. Now, after your next few breaths, you'll be ready to emerge, relaxed, refreshed, and renewed, and fully capable of grasping the lessons and the layers of today's sacred instruction. Amen. Ma'at. Iyiti, and welcome to the Communion Experience. Once again, this is your host, the Nasip Biddy, Ra Sanku Kepper, Chief and Head Priest of the Templeofanu, facilitating our bi-weekly discussions about how to walk in peace and power by way of the teachings of the ancient Kemetic tradition. So as we proceed to get into what we call the word of the day. Now, the word of the day is when we take one word from the ancient hieroglyphic language called Sesh Medoneter, the divine written words, or even Jed Medu, spoken words or words that tell. So we give a basic cultural meaning and then we expound on it metaphysically for further application in our lives. So today is the easy one, folks, is one you all heard before. So the word of the day is netter. Netter is the word of the day. Now, the word netter consists of a grouping of words starting with the symbol called the flag. The flag is a trilateral. A trilateral is a symbol which is pronounced with 3 syllables. So you see the word netter, N-T-R, which is really ni-ta-ra, netter. The next symbol is that of a loaf of bread, and it represents the letter T and the sound value of ta or T. Now, the next symbol is interchangeable with the T, and it's interchangeable with the cha sound. And its symbol is a yoke or a tether or tethering rope for animals. And that's why you hear certain people say netter and some people say netcher. It could be pronounced both. So folks, there's no need to argue back and forth about it. It can be pronounced both ways. Now the next symbol is the mouth. And the mouth is to represent the letter R with the sound value ra or re or yira or yire. And lastly, there's the determinative, which is a symbol that is not pronounced, but is used as a context clue as to how to approach determining the translation of the word. And that determinative is of a seated, bearded man. So the whole of the word netter equals spirit, God, or power. Now, some people say that it's a flag. Some people say that it's an axe. And once again, like you see with the word netter and netter, both could be true at the same time without being in contradiction. In my personal experience at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, I seen in a certain section where they had items of someone's tomb, and I saw what appeared to be a ceremonial axe that was wrapped in white cloth, and it looked identical to the symbol for netter. And it makes sense. An axe, or one who wields an axe, can be considered someone that's powerful. So an axe could represent a symbol of power. And the scholars say it is a flag. So I'm not here to contradict what the scholars say, because technically both definitions work. So a flags are often used in front of temples. A flag represents a sovereign principle or power. So an axe could represent power, and the flag represents a sovereign principle of power. So netter is a power or sovereign, powerful principle. The next symbol would be the bread, represents T or ta, the sound value ta. Bread represents something that's substantive. Before we eat bread, we have to knead it in the form of dough. Dough represents kind of like putty. And the word putty is interesting to me because it's connected to the word paut. Paut means the substance or the cycle of the neteru. Paut, neter, the cycle of the neteru. And the word pauti represents substance, the substance of the neteru, the substance of existence. So netter is a powerful principle, a powerful substantive principle, or substantive power. The next symbol, as we said, that is interchangeable with the T, which is the sound value of cha, which is the yoke or the tether, and that is something that is attached or can be used as a harness to guide. So netter is a substantive power that can be harnessed. And the next symbol would be the mouth. The mouth represents the letter R, the sound value ra or re. And we got into it, I think is the past 3 or 4 words of the day which consist of the letter R, and we said R represents action, the action of words, the power of words. And we referenced the book of Knowing the Creations of Ra and Overcoming Evil, when it says, many were the beings that came forth from my mouth. When I came into existence, existence came into existence. Many were the beings that came forth from my mouth. That is Ra speaking at the beginning. So netter is a substantive power that can be harnessed by way of the word. And the bearded man represents the idea that this power or this principle exists within a man. Now let us not forget the females or the women. The same word, netter, is netteret, and it's the feminine variation of netter. And it is pronounced with an extra T at the end, or extra bread at the end. And this means that the feminine is doubly considered, or perhaps doubly substantive, for a woman bears a child, which is a potential whole human being. And you often hear women say that I'm eating for 2. So it's doubly considered and doubly substantive. What's interesting is in this word netter or netteret, the determinative for netteret is oftentimes a seated woman, but it's often interchanged with a serpent. And please don't confuse the serpent with Eve and the serpent in the garden and somehow use as a symbol for seduction or transgression. Here in this sense, we're referring to the netteret, Ujat, or Wajet, which is one of the deities governing the year for us. In this light, Wajet can correspond to Kundalini energy. Kundalini energy is most popular in the Hindu theology. In the Hindu theology, Kundalini is a goddess. She's a serpent goddess, and once again, these are all metaphors and principles that exist within us. So she's a goddess that's considered to be exists within the body at the base of the spine, and its symbol is a serpent that has 3 coils and is upraised. And through the process of metaphysical rites and ceremonies, this energy is raised up the spine to the crown of the head, or the forehead and the crown of the head, and it represents the foundation for enlightenment. And as we can see, Ujat also in the Kemetic symbology is on the brow of the crown of the reigning Nasut. So here you have Neter, the power or spirit, a substantive power or spirit that can be harnessed by words, but not just any words. Meru Neter, divine words, or Hekau, words of power. And where do these things happen? Within. That's why you have the image of the seated, bearded man. And then you have Neteret, the power, spirit, or goddess that can be harnessed through metaphysical arousal of the life force within the figure of the seated woman's body. So there you have it. Meru Neter, the word of the day. Neter is the word of the day, interpreted through a metaphysical lens. Yeetie, and welcome back. So now let's get into the message of the day. So we just ended off or concluded the word of the day discussing the Neteret, Ujat, or Wajet, which just happens to be one of the governing deities of the year. You know, the past 2 communions I discussed Wet Rempet twice, but I want you to go back and re-review the communion called What Have You Learned? And go back to earlier in the year, there was a communion called, I believe, the goddess Wajet or Ujat. So go back and re-review the goddess Ujat and What Have You Learned, and then bring it on home with this message today. Now, there's 2 governing deities of the year. So this is like a re-review of the year, because we're more than halfway through the year. We have to land this plane smooth, but with power. And we wanted to stay on task and not just get into just discussing Kemetic things. I just want to, the vision of this channel was to always discuss things that were relevant through a Kemetic filter. So let us get into it. So the goddess of the year, or the Neteret of the year, is Ujat. And Ujat represents psychic energy. It represents the interpretation of spiritual energy. It represents spiritual connection, psychic renewal and rejuvenation, the arousal and the cleansing and the clearing of internal spiritual energy. And the Neter, or the Neter of the year, would be Anupu or Anpu, which is a jackal-headed being. And it represents the concept or the idea of death, transition, transformation, radical transformation, or even completion. So today's lesson is going to be relatively short. We're just going to get right to it. I'm going to ask only 3 questions. And these 3 questions only you can answer in your own unique way. And I would appreciate if some of you could leave some of your insights or some of your experiences of the year in the comments section, because I do read all the comments and it helps me flesh out the direction of the communion, because here we all are on this journey. It's not millions of people, it's not thousands of people. Right now it appears to be several hundred people that frequent this channel. So we have a soft contract to get through the energy and the readings of the year together. So let us land this plane. So the first of the several questions is, have you shifted, changed, or transformed this year? B, which is a question to the main question is, or what has shifted, changed, or transformed in your life this year? So to give it context, let us contrast the difference between a shift, a change, and a transformation. Now, a shift is more like a incremental adjustment, such as like changing your hairstyle or changing your wardrobe. And then you judge it in relationship to how how your relationships with people are affected by it, or how life gives you feedback through people. So you could be like, well, I changed my hairstyle, I changed my wardrobe, and people started treating me different. It could be better or worse. That's a shift. A change is more of a consequential adjustment, such as like changing your diet or changing your circle of people or your circle of influence, and then judging how the feedback from life comes through your circle of influence. And you can be like, well, I changed up my wardrobe and I changed up my circle of people, or I changed up my diet and I changed my circle of people, and I show up different in life. And now these new people that I have in my life, they treat me a certain way and I'm offered a different experience. So my life has changed since last year after I made these changes. And then you have transformation. Transformation is kind of like the difference between the cocoon and the butterfly. It's a whole 180 difference from last year. So it's bigger than just changing your hair or changing your diet. It could be changing your diet, but it could also be changing your residence, changing your job location. And you look at it like, wow, I'm in a total different place than I was last year. I'm in a total different income bracket than last year. And it's like, wow, I'm living my dream. And if not living my dream, I'm well on the way of living my dream. And then there's transformation. I mean, radical transformation, a cathartic transformation. Cathartic transformation or radical transformation is when it appears that a force or forces outside of yourself was forcing you to change. And while you're going through it, it appears to be a negative thing, and it feels like somebody or something's messing with you. You might even interpret it as evil forces, but you'll find out if you endure. In the end of it all, it winded up being for your best interest. It could be something as simple as being fired from a job. It could be loss of a residence through catastrophe or even being evicted. And it could be a serious health crisis. Or it could be the loss of a relationship or the loss of relationships. Now consider this. Consider the metaphysical implications of it all, because you may be participating in a certain amount of ritual or spiritual work. And through this ritual or spiritual work, you've aroused energies in your subconscious and your superconscious. So subconscious and superconscious are just allegories for primal forces of the Neteru, or the deities within, and your ancestors within. So you might have done some ceremonies, you've aroused these primal forces, and you've invoked these primal forces, you ask for certain things, and they're precipitating into your life. But somehow, somewhere along the line, you might have got lost or got arrogant or became disconnected from what it was that you were actually asking for. And so when these things precipitate into your life, these are things that you ask for. However, the form that it comes in may be unrecognizable. But remember, the caveat was, if you endure through it, it turns out to be for your best interest. So that job you might have got fired from cleared the way, or maybe cleared the way or opened the way for you to now follow your heart. And following your heart may be another career. Following your heart might be an entrepreneurial endeavor, you see, and that's always best for you in the end, or for your benefit in the end. The loss of residence may cause you to prioritize your finances, and maybe because you prioritize your finances, now you're in your dream home or a better residence that's more ideal of who you say you are and who you were trying to become, as opposed to just being comfortable, yet the quality of life does not reflect, or did not reflect, who it is that you say you were trying to become. Then it could be the health crises or the health challenge. And most people, or a lot of people, they have health challenges or health crises that they kind of put the rug over. And sometimes these things come to a head, kind of like a pimple. A pimple represents a, that you need a detox, that there's internal uncleanliness and it comes to the surface. So the body or the consciousness is expecting you to have the requisite protocol to help cleanse the body out, to clean this process, or to put closure to this process. So a health crisis is bringing something to your attention that you need to shift, change, or transmute in your life. So it may cause you to prioritize your health. And we should all know by now that prioritizing your health is always beneficial for you in the end. And what about losing people, losing relationships, or a relationship? Sometimes you need to be released from certain relationships that had you stuck in the lower or lesser version of yourself, or a shrunken version of yourself. And to be released from a relationship or relationships now releases you to become who you say you were the whole time, or at least who you say you were trying to become. Now you see that collectively we're in a different place now. So research is no longer the end all be all of things. Of course, continue to research, but it's not the end all or be all. Authentic transformation is the final boss. Authentic transformation is the only worthy goal. That was always the goal in the first place. Of course, continue to research, but it's bigger than research at the end of the day. To be honest, I don't even research like I used to back in the day, but I have tons of books. And I came across a saying, it said you're supposed to read every book at least 7 times, because until you read it several times, you won't really understand or get all the layers of meaning that the author was trying to transmit. These days, I find myself investigating my own thoughts and feelings about what it is that I say I believe. And not enough people do that. A lot of people, with the advent of the internet, a lot of people spend a lot of time online listening to the thoughts and opinions of other people. And it said the source of most problems is a person's inability to sit in the room by themselves. And that's a powerful saying. I don't know who said it, but it says most people's problem comes from their inability to sit in the room by themselves. As I said, these days I spend my time investigating my own thoughts and my own feelings about what it is that I believe. And beliefs are not necessarily facts. Beliefs are what you call mental acceptances. However, a belief can be morphed into a fact. And we see this through the process. Have you all heard of a placebo, or the so-called placebo effect? Is how a belief can become a fact. Or what about what they call anecdotal evidence? Let's go with the placebo effect. A placebo is when you could take a group of like 30 people and separate them into 2 groups of 15. And this is how scientists test the efficacy of drugs. So they take 30 people and separate them into groups of 15, and they give each group a pill. One group will get a sugar pill, which adds no benefit or harm to the body. It's pretty much empty calories. And then they give the next group the drug. But each group is told that they're being given the drug. And what they found out is through the group that was given the placebo, the sugar pill, there was effect. There was effect that it had in the body, meaning the placebo effect activated the mind and the belief system, meaning the people believed that this thing was a drug that was going to improve their condition, whether it was diabetes, high blood pressure, or cancer. So their belief in the pill caused a reaction that was in the higher percentile of 70 to 77%, which is interesting. That's kind of high. That means a drug would only have to only be 30% effective, then the mind and the belief in the drug would do the rest of the work. That's interesting. This is connected to what our ancestors did when they gave you some beads and be like, wear these colored beads. When you wear it, the presence of that nectar or that orisha will stay around you. Wear this ring. This ring is charged with spiritual protection. And when you wear it, Your aura is sealed and no evil can harm you. Don't put these things in your house because it brings evil to your house, or put up your altar because your ancestors will stay in your house if you put up your altar. So these things that psychologists and scientists are calling the placebo effect is the foundation of what's known as juju in the ATR system. And what about this thing called anecdotal evidence? Anecdotal evidence is when a person's experience defies or contradicts the scientific process. The scientific process was made up by men. They go through this process, which they use to determine whether a thing is factual or not. And we've all heard of scenarios like this. It could be such a situation where the person could have cancer and they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, you have third stage such and such cancer, and you're going to die if you don't get chemotherapy. And the person say, well, doctor, you think if I take these herbs, you think it make a help with that? And the doctor will say, no, you can't take those herbs because there's been no scientific evidence to prove that those herbs work. And you could be like, well, respectfully, doc, these herbs has been in my families for hundreds of years. My grandmother's a healer, about, all of those things. My grandfather's a healer, my brother's a priest, or something like that. And then the doctor said, I wouldn't advise it. You're playing with fire. You need to get into these chemotherapy treatments or you are going to die. And the person said, respectfully, doc, I think I'm going to take my chances. And then they take their chaparral, they take their wormwood, they take their black walnut, and they do the green juices, and they fast and they pray and they meditate. Then a month later, they come back to the doctor, and the doctor is scratching their head because he don't understand how the cancer went into remission, because what they did was folk medicine and there was no scientific evidence to prove that any of that stuff worked. So the person says, so the natural thing cures cancer. I'm going to tell everybody to do the natural thing or the naturopathy because that's what cures cancer. And then the doctor would say, no, it's dangerous for you to say that. You can't say that because there's been no scientific evidence to prove that. That's just anecdotal. That's just an anecdotal experience. You are not the rule. You are just the exception to the rule. So what does that teach us about belief and the mind? It teaches us that, yes, the mind and belief can, in fact, become a fact when the subconscious mind gets a hold of it. Now, the next question is, have you used what it is that you learned? Have you used what it is that you learned? And B, which is a sub question to the main question, is, have you used what you've learned to the best of your ability? That's an interesting caveat. Have you used what you learned to the best of your ability? And C, if so, has it gotten you what you wanted or gotten you close to what it is that you want? See, if so, has it gotten you what you wanted or gotten you close to what it is that you wanted? And that's an interesting question because some people just listen to other people, and you just listen for the sake of listening, just listen for the sake of arguing, listening for the sake of whether you agree or disagree. But a lot of people don't actually use the information. And some people they just collect or gather information, gather initiations and trinkets and signs and symbols and evidence of initiation with no improvement in their life or their quality of life, all just to demonstrate that they're different or contrasted with others. And I'm not the same as them. I'm different. I'm special, but not too special, because a lot of people don't want to just totally alienate themselves from their people. So they get these initiations and this information, this special knowledge, just to say, I suffer more nobly than you. Run that back because I can't repeat that. And then lastly, the question is, are you aligned? And B, what is it that you're aligned with? I think we should actually add the word alignment to one of the definitions of Ma'at. We have Ma'at represents truth, justice, righteousness, harmony. balance, order, reciprocity, but alignment feels in alignment with the concept of ma'at also. When we talk about the concept of alignment, we have to consider two things. We have to consider energetic authenticity and internal energetic consistency. Again, energetic authenticity and two, internal energetic consistency. I think one of the worst things that we could have did as a people is talk about our journey as Black or melanated folks by calling it the struggle. By calling it the struggle, it causes us to live in contrast or contradiction to who we say we are or who we say we're trying to become. Because the dictates of this legacy of ours teaches you to lean into your power, teaches you ba'ipu neter, ba'ipu hek. My soul is neter, my soul is divine, my soul is eternal. So if that's the charge, if that's what it is that you believe you are and who you're supposed to become, you cannot entertain victim consciousness because it's in contradiction to neter and who you're supposed to become. So you cannot praise the ancestors off your lips while you're internally conflicted, because that confliction is a contradiction. And that contradiction is confusion. That contradiction is chaos. And when you have confliction, contradiction, confusion, and chaos, you're not being a clear signal and you're not being a clear receptor of the signal. Because remember, you have the neter on your ancestors that you're allegedly trying to commune with, and they can't get to you because you're conflicted. You have contradiction, you have confusion, you have chaos, which then exposes this whole concept when people say, well, if God was real, why did he let this happen? If God was real, why this didn't happen? If the ancestors were real, why this? Now you see, this is about energetic authenticity and internal energetic consistency. So now you see it's internal energetic inconsistency that explains the lack of results. So what are you invoking? What is the charge of this legacy? Are you in alignment, or what are you in alignment with? And the alignment of the legacy says you're a divine being. So if you're not experiencing magical effects, or if you're not living a life as a divine being, could it be, or the only answer is that you have internal energetic inconsistency. And that opens up a whole other level of conversation that we'll get into in another communion. So we'll conclude there. Now, I want to invite you all one more time for the First Eye on Kemet class. We're closing out. The First Eye on Kemet class is the last time we're offering it for this year. It's half off. Next year, the price will go up. So we're coming up at the end of September, going into October. And once again, the First Eye on Kemet is not just another class to take for more information. The First Eye on Kemet class is for people who are ready to get their heads out of the books and put themselves in a position where they might be willing to try to live some of these principles. And you're learning it from someone in a circle of people that's been doing this for the past 30 years. Because ultimately, it's about getting out of your head and into your life. Because after all, isn't the legacy about living the legacy, not talking about it, not just understanding it, but living the legacy? So I'll leave you on that note. Once again, take what's useful and discard the rest. And I say, claim your peace, personify power, and stay dangerous. This is the Nasib Bidi Rasanku Kepper saying Shemi Matep, Di Anu, Uncle Ja Seneb.